Imaginators is very much the most disliked game in the series for a multitude of reasons. Uh, However, one of the most common criticisms I hear is that the soundtrack is awful compared to the other 5 games. And while I think that is to a degree true, I don't think that the soundtrack is necessarily bad. It's just lazy. It's pretty common knowledge that Imaginators, rather than bringing back the composer for the previous games, Lorne Balfe, instead they got a bunch of stock music and picked out a bunch of tracks and just used that. And just to show you what I mean, I'm on APM Music right now, which is a very big stock music licensing site. So a lot of big companies will come here to get stock music. And if I look up, I know the name of it, but Heroes All. And then, where is it? Oh, what's this? And you click the first one. Doesn't that sound familiar? And you can do that with a lot of things. You just get the names from like a music identifier. Oh, what could Golden Swagger be? Oh, doesn't where have I heard that before? So it's pretty clear that for Imaginators, they just ripped a bunch of stock music. But that started back in Trap Team with not only the villain themes, which I've talked about a lot before, but a lot of the level themes themselves were stock music. The best example I can think of is for Midnight Museum. That entire level theme comes from APM, and that kind of went on to become the theme for the dark element that's in all the elemental gates and the Sensei Zone in Imaginators. But that's just stock music. And just to show you that, here's the Midnight Museum music. And then you compare that to this track right here called Tiptoes, and so as you can see, this all started back with Trap Team. I don't know exactly why, but I think it was more accepted back then because Lorne was still composing and the stock music was just added on for the other stuff. But at the same time, with the previous games, every single thing was made specifically for the game until Trap Team, where half the stuff is made by the composers and dedicated for the Skylanders games, where the other half is stock music. Another thing you might have noticed in the comparison between the Midnight Museum track is that the track used in game is very slowed down and altered, which is a common theme with the stock music used. It'll be sampled or slowed down or sped up or cut up and rearranged to create a slightly different track based on the original music. The best example of this is the After Party, which is a track found in Superchargers, but in the official album, meaning it was directly composed by Lorne Balfe. However, it uses a sample, or at the very least, a very similar track to Chef Pepperjack's theme in Trap Team, which is stock music from APM. And here's that comparison also to show you what I'm referring to. What I'm getting at is that stock music has been used in Skylanders since Trap Team, and it's not very noticeable in Superchargers, but there are hints of it. And in Imaginators, they just kind of go all the way with it. But when it's used in Trap Team, it's iconic and people like it. I think there's one very specific example of a piece of stock music used that people absolutely love. However, when you get to Imaginators, it is very much disliked and hated on. With all this, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think stock music is the problem. I think the usage of it was very lazy, but the stock music itself isn't bad at all. And I think Imaginators does have a pretty good soundtrack. It 100% has the lowest lows of the entire series. Specifically Fizzland. There's the entire music for that level is horrendous. I hate every part of it. But I can think of a multitude of tracks used in Imaginators that I would easily put up with some of the best from Spyro's Adventure and Trap Team and Swap Force and everything else. The first thing that comes to mind is the music that plays when you're in the hub world, the MAP or the map. I think that this theme, which I believe is called Lucky Day, on APM, I would truthfully put it right under the themes for the Ruin and Skylander Academy. But I would definitely put it above Welcome to Woodburrow, or the whatever the hub world theme for Swap Force was. I think this is one of the examples where the stock music fits perfectly with the atmosphere and what it's trying to do. There's also the themes for each battle class, and while most of them I think are pretty mediocre, I think the Quick Shot theme and the Ninja theme are exceptional. I think the theme for the Ninja is probably the best track in Imaginators. Just because it lacks that Skylander feel, but at the same time, I think it enhances the concept it's going for here. And don't get me wrong, in a Skylanders soundtrack, I will always 100% prefer that Skylanders tone and feeling that's in the Lorne Balfe tracks and everything from the first 5 games. However, I think a track like this fits really well. And while the Ninja theme, I think, is the best track in Imaginators, my favorite will always be the light version of the country theme in the Imaginators creator menu. This is kind of the thing that it's the reason why I like Imaginators soundtrack, because throughout all the reuses and stock music, there are gems. There are things that invoke the sort of Skylander feel without being Skylanders, necessarily. This specific one, which on APM is called The Whistling Cowboy, it gives that same sort of feeling that something like the main theme from the first game or Junkyard Isles would give, where it's the slow, calming track that it takes you out of the action of Skylanders and just feels super smooth and settled. And for bonus points, I really love like the cowboy western type tracks and music. So I just really love this track specifically, and it's kind of what pushed me to make this, saying not everything in Imaginators is bad, and I think the soundtrack itself is really underrated. While Imaginators is very flawed, and it is almost certainly the weakest game in the franchise, and a big part of that is because it cuts a lot of corners in its development, especially with not bringing back Lorne Balfe to compose for it, and instead, using publicly available music. However, I don't think that makes the soundtrack bad. I think there are very good pieces of it. Now, I think the thing that its soundtrack lacks is consistency. I think Spyro's Adventure has the best soundtrack in the game, and that's because the entire thing is diverse from each level, but they all have that same sense and feeling, and they use the same instruments. Whereas Imaginators, every single thing is made by a completely different person with completely different skills and a completely different intention. And I think some of them don't work very well in this setting. However, there are some I think work very well, and it really depends on how the development team chose to implement them. At the same time, there's those tracks which are reused and remade from the previous games. At the beginning of the video, I used the 8-bit track in the character creator, which comes from the mini games and trap team for the Skylander Academy. And I can also think of how for Dragon Temple, they reused the magic from both Dragon Peak and Glacier Gully. But what all of this is that just because it's stock music, it's not very bad. It is usually pretty good. Trap Team, it has been not necessarily praised, but when Trap Team uses stuff from APM, it's usually met with, hey, this is pretty cool. I like this. Again, Kill Bill's theme being the best example. But I think there are a lot of examples from Imaginators that could also become that iconic. Despite it being stock music, it's just as iconic as the music from the first game, or Giants, or Superchargers. But that's just my take. I guess let me know what you think. Tell me if I'm completely wrong. Or tell me if you agree with me. And that'll be the end of it. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.